So these videos on the lost tribes of Israel are becoming really interesting. I didn't expect the evidence to build like this. Breadcrumb after breadcrumb, trail after trail, but here we are. And in this one, I found something really strange, because now we've got recorded accounts, real historical sources that show the Crusaders weren't just fighting for Jerusalem. They were looking for something tied to the lost tribes of Israel. Were they trying to discover lost knowledge? Were they hunting for sacred relics, scrolls, priestly objects, royal emblems? Were they trying to reform the tribe of Judah or claim it? Were they tracing the path of Dan or recovering the birthright of Joseph through Ephraim and Manasseh? But first, I want to respond to something I keep seeing in the comments. A few people are asking, where's the proof? Where's the genetic connection between the lost tribes and Britain? Well, let's talk about genetics, because even though it's small, there is something. Genetic studies from Wikipedia and family tree DNA projects have shown that haplogroups J1 and J2, both associated with Semitic populations, including the ancient Israelites, are present in Britain and Scotland, albeit at low frequencies. Typically under 1 to 2%, these lineages have been detected in parts of southern England and coastal regions of Scotland. This rarity does not disprove their significance. Rather, it represents the sheer antiquity of their arrival. Genetic markers dissipate and dilute over millennia, especially when small founding populations are absorbed into much larger native populations. There are several plausible avenues by which these haplogroups entered the British gene pool. Phoenician traders, Roman soldiers and settlers, Jewish diaspora movements, and returning crusaders all had contact with Semitic populations and may have carried J1 or J2 lineages into the Isles. One Gnostic Christian theory suggests that seafaring groups like the tribe of Dan, often associated with maritime travel and linked to both the Eastern Mediterranean and Ireland, may have introduced these lineages during the Bronze Age. The Crusades added to this genetic pool as European knights spent years in the Levant and returned, sometimes with Eastern wives or offspring. While small in number, the presence of J1 and J2 haplogroups correlates with the symbolic, heraldic, and historical case for Israelite ancestry in Britain. By the time Norman rule was established, numerous noble houses were thought to have borne tribal blood, primarily of Judah, Dan, and Ephraim, though the fact may not have been consciously preserved. The Normans themselves may have inherited this lineage through maternal lines or intermarriage. The reappearance of symbols like the lion in royal and noble heraldry, especially the lion rampant of Scotland, is therefore not just as a feudal emblem, but as a resurfacing of ancient tribal memory. In this view, even the Normans acted as vessels for a forgotten ancestry, preserving and reviving Israelite identity in new forms through the Crusaders, the Templars, and later Masonic traditions. In 1118, 9 knights, led by Hugues de Payens, presented themselves to King Baldwin I of Jerusalem and petitioned for permission to form a new religious order. They called themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. Their quarters were established in a wing of the royal palace, which stood on the site of the former Temple of Solomon. For 9 years, the original 9 Templars did not engage in any military activity. There is no record of them fighting. Instead, they appear to have been engaged in other pursuits, including excavations beneath the temple. While their official purpose was to protect Christian pilgrims' historical records, including the temple and the lodge, the Parchment of Chinon, and William of Tyre, indicate that the Templars spent years excavating beneath the ruins of Solomon's temple. They weren't just military monks, but were really seekers of ancient Israelite relics or records, possibly from the First Temple period. These included the Ark of the Covenant, containing the original tablets of the law, lost priesthood scrolls, Solomon's architectural blueprints, and esoteric texts like the Book of Enoch or mystical writings attributed to Solomon. But I believe the Templars' task was not limited to the recovery of relics alone. Among the Dead Sea discoveries made at Qumran in the last century was a document known as the Temple Scroll, a strange and solemn text. It talks about a time when a future temple will be created only once the people have been purified, that is, once they've been ritually washed in water, abstained from sexual impurity, kept the Levitical laws, and been reorganized according to the 12 tribes of Israel. This scroll is remarkably different from the Copper Scroll, which catalogues vessels of gold and ritual objects concealed before the Roman advance. The Temple Scroll outlines dimensions, sacrificial ordinances, and laws of sanctity. Yet beneath its architecture lies something more strange, a vision of restoration of a building of priesthood, of law, and of the 12 tribes themselves. It reads as if spoken to a people in exile, a scattered nation cut off from its inheritance, waiting to return to the sanctuary of Israel itself. If the Templars found even parts of this scroll, whether through hidden Christian monasteries in the east or during secret excavations beneath the old temple in Jerusalem, then their true mission must be looked at differently. They weren't just guardians of Crusader relics or holy sites, they were preparing for something. Items like the staff of Aaron or Levitical garments could have confirmed a tribal lineage, while royal insignia tied to Judah would have given claims of divine kingship. These were the foundations of Israelite identity and priestly authority. If recovered, they would have enabled the Templars to bypass Rome entirely and reawaken a far older spiritual order in the lost tribes themselves. What we do have is the Copper Scroll discovered in Cave 3 near the Dead Sea in 1952. Unlike other Dead Sea texts, this one lists dozens of hidden temple treasures said to have been buried before the Roman destruction. It may be a genuine inventory from the first or second temple, possibly including the Ark or priestly artifacts. Unfortunately, Israeli authorities have tightly controlled excavations near the Temple Mount and other sensitive biblical areas due to tensions with Muslim, Christian, and Jewish groups. Although there is a trail of compelling clues which suggest they may not have been completely lost. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has long claimed to possess the Ark of the Covenant in Aksum, guarded by a single monk, and never revealed. Meanwhile, 12th century accounts, notably from Usama ibn Munkid, along with later Masonic researchers, report that the Knights Templar spent nearly a decade excavating beneath the Temple Mount before their sudden rise to power and influence. So, did they find anything? Secret societies like the Freemasons and Rosicrucians, which trace their origins to the Templars, remain obsessed with Temple-era relics, from the Ark and High Priest's breastplate to Enochian scrolls and Solomonic mysteries, preserving them in their rituals and allegories. It's also possible the Vatican may have confiscated or suppressed such discoveries during or after the Templar trials, as hinted in documents like the Parchment of Chinon. So what does this show us? This activity connects them directly to the history of Israel and opens the door to the theory that they were attempting to recover sacred knowledge from the lost tribes. This becomes even more apparent when we observe their highly unusual initiation rituals. We know of these strange rituals as during the brutal trials of the early 1300s, dozens of Templars under oath and often under threat described the exact same rites: baptisms, kisses, oaths, denials. These were transcribed confessions, hidden in church archives, and rediscovered centuries later in documents like the Chinon parchment. When you piece it all together, it becomes clear. The Templars were not inventing these rites, they were enacting something inherited, the remnants of a far older priesthood. These elements are important because they show us that the Templars were not just a Catholic military order, but were preserving or rediscovering esoteric pre-Roman traditions, possibly originating with the lost tribes of Israel. Before admission, the initiate was washed with water. This was not baptism, nor was it a Roman sacrament. In the records of Israelite law, the Levites and Nazarites were commanded to wash before serving in the temple. The same practice appears in the writings found at Qumran and in accounts of the Essenes. It was a rite of preparation for the presence of the sacred. There was also the ritual of the kiss placed upon the mouth or lower back. To the Muslim chronicler 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿, it appeared strange and unclean. To the church, it was profane, but symbolic gestures of this kind were not new. In Gnostic writings, touch and breath carried meaning, conferring spirit, allegiance, and hidden knowledge. In the Hebrew tradition, sacred objects were anointed and men were consecrated by the laying on of hands. The oath came next. First, secrecy. The initiate swore never to reveal the inner workings of the order or its rites, under threat of punishment, sometimes even death. Second, obedience to the master, complete obedience to the Grand Master or local commander. Third, renunciation of personal wealth and property and inheritance were to be given over to the order. Fourth, allegiance before kings or clergy. In some accusations, the Templars were said to have pledged allegiance even above Pope or King, one of the charges that led to their downfall. Fifth, rejection of false pride and vanity. Initiates were expected to adopt humility, chastity, and discipline, at least in the rule, if not always in practice, like the strict codes of the old mystery cults or the guarded societies at Qumran. What they swore to protect is unclear, but the pattern is very familiar. A priestly group entrusted with something not to be spoken of openly. And finally, the most dangerous charge, the denial of Christ, a strange accusation for men sworn to defend Jerusalem. But in some texts, this denial is not a rejection, but transformation, a ritual death. It was not a denial of Christ, but a refusal of the Christ enthroned by Rome, a rejection not of Christ himself, but of the empire that created him. What they performed was a wisdom hidden from the masses, the secret knowledge of the Gnostics, wherein salvation came not through altar nor bishop, but by the light already within the soul. Some Gnostic texts, like the second treatise of the great Seth, go further, claiming that it was not Jesus who suffered on the cross, but a substitute. It was another, their father, who drank the gall and the vinegar. It was another who bore the cross. This idea, known as Docetism, viewed the crucifixion as a deception allowed by higher powers to preserve the truth. If the Templars inherited even fragments of this doctrine, then their so-called denial may have been an ideology far older, a rejection of imperial theology in favour of a hidden inner gospel. Taken together, these rituals do not describe the Catholic ideology of Rome. They show a remnant of men abiding by an older law, perhaps even a scattered priesthood preserving rites from the lost tribes of Israel. Sources such as the Nag Hammadi Library, the Gospel of Judas, and the De Molle trial documents show clear parallels between Templar rites and ancient Gnostic beliefs. Were they guardians of a suppressed pre-Roman form of Christianity linked to the tribes of Israel? And then there's the line of kings. These are the restoration of a forgotten priesthood, referring to the house of David, the ancient royal bloodline of Israel. King David and his son Solomon came from the tribe of Judah. According to the Bible and later Jewish tradition, particularly rabbinic and Kabbalistic writings, their lineage carried messianic and divine authority, and interestingly, the Messiah was to come from this line. This lineage carried divine legitimacy, meaning kingship was political, spiritual, and ancestral. If you possessed relics connected to this house, like Solomon's scrolls, Judah's royal emblems, or the Ark, you could claim divine authority independent of Rome. This was imperative to the Templars and Crusaders. If a group like the Templars could recover lost relics of Davidic kingship or priestly authority, they could position themselves as heirs to a more ancient Israelite-based order, bypassing papal control entirely. Some European royal houses, especially in Scotland and England, were later mythologized as being descended from the House of David. Judah's scepter and Joseph's birthright and the Declaration of Arbroath both express this idea. If true, it would mean those monarchs had God-given rule. This is the same ideology as ancient Israel. Some Gnostic and Templar traditions saw Christ as a royal figure of Israel, heir to a line of hidden kingship, and the Grail legends often show this. The Holy Grail is sometimes interpreted as a symbol of the bloodline of Christ, i.e. the Davidic line, and a vessel of sacred knowledge or Israelite wisdom preserved through secret orders. The 10 lost tribes, especially Ephraim and Manasseh, House of Joseph, were said to have carried the birthright, while Judah carried the scepter, the kingly line. Judah's scepter and Joseph's birthright argues that these two houses were split, but their restoration was prophesied. The Crusaders, knowingly or unknowingly, were operating in the very lands of these tribes, and by pursuing ancient relics, they may have been attempting to reunite the lost spiritual and tribal authority of Israel. Was the temple ever truly lost? Or has its plan been preserved? Degree by degree through the hands of architects and kings, did the Crusaders retrieve something beneath Jerusalem, something never recorded but ritually reenacted to this day? And if the line of David was never broken, if the Levite code was never abandoned, then who governs and controls it by it now?